Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. This is not your typical Word Weavers or Florida Christian Writers Conference recording. This is going to be an episode of Eva Marie and the Experts. So I'm Eva Marie Everson. I am the president of Word Weavers International, and the person sitting next to me is Taryn Souders. Now, you typically know her as the vice president of Word Weavers International, but you also know her as the co-director for Florida Christian Writers Conference. But Taryn is an expert in her own right in other areas, and that is children's writing or children's publishing, etc. Now, I want to start off by asking you, Taryn, to tell us a little bit about your background in children's book writing and the books that you have written, and maybe even some of the awards that you have won.
Okay. The very first book that I ever did was a picture book, and it was called Holy Cow, Fractions Are Fun. And that came from my experience as being a math teacher. So I actually got my degree in interdisciplinary studies with a specialization in mathematics and taught algebra, pre-algebra before we had kids. And then when we had kids, I stayed at home and was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do from home that can still kind of be math related, but not in a classroom. And so I had always enjoyed reading and writing, figured, you know what, let's give this book writing thing a shot. And so I wrote Holy Cow, Fractions Are Fun, and was able to sell that to Sleeping Bear Press. And I'm like, well, that worked out well. Let's try that again. And so, but I wanted to see if I could do something involving more words, because I was just curious. Again, I think the fun thing about writing is, let me see if I can, and then you try it.
And then you try it. Yeah.
And then you try it. That's right. So I wrote Dead Possums Are Fair Game, which still had a pretty strong math element. I wasn't ready to give up the math element yet. And I sold that. And I said, all right, well, let's just keep this ball rolling. And so I've been writing middle grade books ever since, because I have found that is really my sweet spot.
That's your wheelhouse. Yeah.
So I enjoy that. So I have written, I've written 5. The 5th one is coming out next year. And I'm working on my 6th middle grade novel right now.
Okay. And you just signed a new contract, did you not?
Yes, for books 5 and 6. So
books 5 and 6. Okay.
That's with Source Books, who I've really enjoyed working with them. My middle grade mystery, Coop Knows the Scoop, has done pretty good. I'm very proud of him.
Yes.
Because he was an Edgar nominee. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Edgars, they're named after Edgar Allan Poe, who is considered the father of mystery. Agatha Christie, she's the queen of mystery, but Edgar Allan Poe is the father of mystery. And there's an award that's given every year to mystery writers. And so that's actually what this little guy right here is. That's Edgar right there.
Oh, yes, there he is. I see him now.
There you go. So that was Coop Knows the Scoop was a nominee for Best Juvenile Mystery. And he's been named to 11 state award reading lists so far, which I'm very pleased with. And so is my publisher.
yeah, I bet. It's funny because I remember when you got the contract, you and I were at a writers conference together in Alabama.
In Alabama.
Yeah, and you got the news, and I can still see when you came flying out of the room and just grabbed me in a hug, and you're like, I got a contract for so it's been really exciting to watch. But I do want to ask you something before we get into the different divisions of children's book writing, because that is the question that I get a lot as the president of Word Weavers International. I get this question about the division of children's book writing, and as you know, I have a picture book coming out with Michelle Medlock Adams in June, which I guess will be next month. But I really know nothing about any of this. I am solely writing on Michelle's coattails when it comes to this one. Yes, she and I wrote this book together, but I still know nothing. So I'm assuming I'm going to learn as we go along. But the number one question I get is about the different divisions. And is this a board book? Is this a picture book? Is this a this? Is this a that? And I really don't know. So I do want to talk to you about that. But before we do, I want to ask you, because you mentioned that, that Coop has gone into this state and that state and all this. Tell me how that works, because I think that people get the impression that you write a book and it goes to the shelf and somebody reads it and goes, oh my gosh, this should win an award. And then there's an award. There's actually a process to getting Coop in front of the right people.
That is correct. Yes. And so, I mean, I'm sure it can happen where someone, and it probably does happen at certain states, where someone reads a book, it's particularly if they're a librarian, and go, oh, I really enjoyed this. I'm going to suggest that this be considered as a title. Every state, I think, except for the state of West Virginia, that I'm not, don't quote me on that, but I've looked and I can't find it. Every state has their own version of a state award list. And this is usually something that is encouraged by the media specialists or librarians in that state to help get kids excited about reading and to introduce them to new books, because there's hundreds of new books that come out every year. And so what you can do is you can go to your state, you just kind of Google what your state is, Tennessee Children's Book Award list, or, Missouri, whatever. And a website will usually pop up saying, this is your state's book award list. And somewhere on there will be how to suggest a title. Now, what that means is you are, and oftentimes you have to be a resident in that state.
Got you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't go and just suggest that my book be read in Illinois, because I don't
right. Yes, right.
But by suggesting a title, that does not mean your book is now on that list. It means you have put your title into this list. There's usually, I know in Florida, I've been told there's anywhere from 300 to 350 titles per year that are suggested. And so I would say, hey, can you consider Coop Knows the Scoop? And so it goes onto this list. And then they have a committee of, oh gosh, I think it's anywhere from like 8 to 10 people or librarians. They then read every single book on that list. And every time they meet several times throughout a year, they will narrow down what their top 15 are. Now, I'm speaking for the state of Florida because a librarian explained it to me. So that they go from 350 or 300, they read all of them to their top 15. And so when you suggest a title, you're suggesting it just be considered, it be read, and then it still has to go through that process. So that's how it works for Florida. And I'm sure it's a similar process for other states, but every state has their own criteria. You either have to be a resident. Some states, only teachers or librarians can suggest. Some states, only children can nominate a book. So it all depends.
It all depends. And so Coop has now made it into how many states?
11.
Wow. That is impressive, Taryn.
I'm very excited. I think that Sourcebooks has done an excellent job of helping get the book out there. I've had friends and family who have helped get the book out there. That's another thing you can do is if you have friends that live in certain states, say, hey, would you mind suggesting that this be considered? And then after that, it's kind of out of your hands. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I think I really do. I know I believed in, when I first started publishing, that these books that won all these awards, that it was just a matter of the right person read it and said, oh my gosh, this book deserves an award. I didn't realize that authors or editors or agents, publishing houses, et cetera, actually enter that book in. It is nominated, and then it goes through a process. And so actually, that makes it all the sweeter when you are nominated,
right?
When you final, then when you win, you go on to be on these lists. It does make a greater difference to me that someone has gone through all this process. So very heartfelt congratulations to you. And like I said, I just remember the day all this seemed to have done, but you already had it written. So
and I was with you when I got the contract for these last two books. So
yes, you were. Yeah.
I think the lesson here is I just need to hang out with you.
Well, you hang out enough with me. So.
I mean, clearly. Right?
Well, it's funny because it was at that conference actually that John Herring, who is the publisher for Iron String Media was watching us work together. And he said, he said to me, she is the right side of your brain. And that's pretty much true. You are my assistant in so many areas, and young enough to be my child, but, but I do count you amongst my friends as well. So, and also as an expert in this area. So let's talk about the first category of children's books, which is board books. What do board books entail?
Okay, so board books are definitely a child's first introduction into books. And when we're I'm going to break these down by who is your audience, like how old is your audience, what is their age, and what's your typical word count, and then maybe what is the typical plot. So for board books, your typical age is anywhere from 0 to 3. And the reason we say 0 is because a lot of times moms to be and dads to be will actually read a book while the baby's in utero.
That's right.
Because it's another way for them to hear your voice.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then your word count can be 0 words to maybe 100 words. There is a thing called pictureless, that would be boring. Wordless board books and wordless picture books, where it's nothing but pictures and the illustration tells the story. So that's why we say 0 sometimes. And then your plot is very, very basic. It's actually usually no plot. It's sometimes like lullabies or a concept book, like this is a circle, this is a square. You're not telling a story. It's visual stimulation.
Yes. Yeah, I remember a book that I bought. It was a board book I bought for Von Shea, my grandson, when he was in utero with my daughter, and it was just circles and all these different kinds of circles, and I was so excited about, and I remember it had won all these awards. It was crazy. And it was nothing but circles, a blue circle and a pink circle. But I got excited about the book. There is something about a board book that just calls back to the child in us.
Yes. And you might say, well, now, Taryn, I've seen like Can Giraffes Dance? And This Is How Much I Love You. And it's all as a board book, but they're actually telling a story. And yes, but those actually started off as picture books.
Right.
They were very, very popular, and they've just made a board book edition.
Right.
They did not start off as a board book.
So then let's talk about picture books. What is a picture book?
A picture book, your audience there is ages 3 to 8, typically. Yes, there are picture books for even middle schoolers. However, that's not your main audience. That's not who's usually buying a picture book. So ages 8 to 3, your word count is anywhere from 250 words to 1,000. 1,000 is really, really high. And your sweet spot, honestly, is 500 words.
Right.
Your main character is in preschool or in kindergarten, or they're an animal. And they're not dealing with school issues at all. Or like bears, they had school issues, but still. It's
those bears that go to school.
That's right.
Or fish that goes.
Think about it. They're all those are those are the popular. Those are the ones that sell well, at least.
The one I'm writing that I wrote with Michelle. It's farm animals.
It's farm animals.
Yeah.
You cannot go wrong.
We even created an animal.
There you go.
Mouselet. Yeah, the mouselet. It was like, what is a baby mouse called? And I said, a mouselet? And we giggled so much that we just created a mouselet.
I love it. They are usually told in third person. It's not often that you're going to have a picture book where it's I did this and I did that.
Okay.
Again, it can be done, and it has been done. Take a look again at Fancy Nancy. That is told in first person. But normally it's third person. That doesn't mean you can't do it in first, but normally it's third. And your plot is very simple.
Okay.
And you need to make sure that your character solves their own problem in a picture book.
Yes.
You cannot have the teacher or mom or dad or whoever telling the main character how their problem needs to be solved, and then the main character goes and does it. Editors don't like that. Agents don't like that. your main character has to solve their own problem. And that's a mistake I see a lot in picture books.
Yeah.
Is that mom just says, well, if you were to go and apologize to Susie, then you guys would be best friends again.
Yeah.
That, little Bobby Joe needs to realize he needs to apologize to Susie.
Right.
So,
right. Got you. Okay. So then what about the early reader?
This is one of the most misunderstood categories apart from middle grade. So early readers are ages 5 to 9.
Okay.
So we're talking kindergarten, honestly, to 3rd grade, which is a pretty big range.
Yeah.
And that's because your range of readers is very vast at this point. There are some kids in kindergarten that are reading at a high level, and you have 3rd graders that are still struggling with phonics. So there's a lot that encompasses this age group. Your word count is about 1,500 words to about 2,000 words.
Okay.
And the plot is actually simpler than that of a picture book.
Isn't that something?
And I know you would think, well, that doesn't make sense. They should be getting more advanced. And the reason that they're not is because at this point, you're trying to get the child to read on their own.
True.
Picture books are often read by an adult.
Right. Yeah.
A little bit bigger vocabulary, and the illustrations help explain what's going on. With an early reader, that child is reading on their own, and they are reading those words by themselves. And so you don't want to complicate things too much with a crazy plot. Some wonderful examples are Amelia Bedelia. Yeah. And it's an older series, but it's a wonderful one to study. Anything by Sid, S-Y-D, Sid Hoth. Danny the Dinosaur is a prime example that I often use. And with early readers, there is only dialogue and action. There is no description whatsoever in an early reader. Yes. And so, in fact, I will, when I teach this class, I will talk about, actually throw a Danny the Dinosaur up on the Yeah, easy for me to say. And it will be like, Danny went to the museum. Danny saw a dinosaur. Yeah. Danny saw a cowboy. It's very basic. Yeah. And it's action and it's dialogue.
Well, it reminds me a lot of the old early readers that I don't know about you, but we had.
Like Dick and Jane.
You had Dick and Jane and Sally and Puff and Spot and Mother and Father. And it was all very basic, but we learned to read on that.
Yes, that is exactly correct. And one of the things that you should also keep in mind is that these are often written in-house. Yeah. And so you don't want to really get your hopes up like, oh, I've written an early reader. I want to try to shop this around. Don't try to shop it around. But most of them, like Random House has their own set of authors writing, their own employees are writing their beginning chapter, or I'm sorry, their early readers.
Yeah. Because I am a Random House early reader writer.
Exactly.
That is my job.
Yeah.
Personally, but
because some of these have, once they graduate from an early reader, they can go to a chapter book, which we're going to get into. But like Amelia Bedelia has an early reader series, also a chapter book series. So when you are listing comps, make sure you're choosing the right one. Right.
Yes. Okay. So let's explain that just in case somebody says, I'm choosing what?
Okay.
A comp.
A comp is a comparable book that is similar to yours in its word count, its audience, maybe even a little bit in its plot. So for instance, let's say you wrote a story about a pig who has these wonderful adventures with a dog. I don't know. Okay. So some comp books, and you're saying that it's a picture book. I have a picture book about a pig who has adventures with a dog. Well, a comp book might be the Olivia series. Because Olivia is a picture book about a pig who has adventures. Yes. So you're going to find books that are similar to yours in word count, in the plot, that have been successful. Because look, this book
obviously, yes. Yeah. I've never heard of this. Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you are finding books that are not older than 5 years. And if you can stick to maybe 3 years, in the past 3 years, this book has been published, it's been very successful. That's really what you want to use. You can go up to 5 years and that's fine. I just came back from a conference and I actually just asked an editor again, like, hey, are these still the stats that you're looking for? And she said, yep, it can be 5 years or less, but really if you can find, 3 years, that's
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing then is a chapter book.
Chapter books. Okay, so chapter books, your ages are going to be anywhere from 6 to 9 or 7 to 10. It's not a huge difference, but some publishers will go either way with that.
Okay.
Your word count is anywhere from 8,500 to 12,000, although some can go all the way up to 20,000.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of, that's for your older readers. There is still a strong focus on dialogue and action.
Yeah.
But you can have some description. It's much faster paced than middle grade or YA. What I tell people is think of a 30-minute sitcom. You have characters who are introduced with a problem and it all gets solved within 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of what a chapter book is. It's a very simple plot. You have a problem that the main character must solve. They try, but more problems come. They eventually solve their problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Some excellent examples would be anything written by Dan Gutman in his My Weird School series.
Okay.
So they're usually pretty thin chapter books. Magic Treehouse is another one. Junie B. Jones is another series.
It has been around forever. What about Judy Moody? Judy Moody was always one of my favorites with my youngest.
Yes, Judy Moody. Yeah, or Stink, which is stories with her brother. So those are both very popular.
Yeah.
Great series to study. And if you'll notice, every one that I just listed and that you also listed are a series.
Right.
And it's very common with chapter books. You want to be able to pitch it as a series.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you definitely want to have 1 or 2 completely finished.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to list other ones in your proposal, like this one's done, and here are potential titles that I am, working on. So
yes.
Pitch it as a series.
Absolutely. All right. And then that takes us to what you do best, middle grade.
Middle grade is my favorite. This is ages 8 to 12. Although some publishers are now saying ages 8 and up. They're actually not putting a limit on it, which I firmly approve of.
Yeah.
Pretty much all I read is middle grade. I love middle grade books. And more adults are beginning to read younger, which is great.
And you are definitely over 12.
I'm over 12, yes.
Yeah.
Kids want to read up. Adults kind of want to read down sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah, I made that comment during, like the worst part of the pandemic when we couldn't go anywhere. We could, everything was shut down. And I made a comment on my Facebook page that all I want to do is go to a bookstore and sit in the children's, book section and just, in those little tables with the little chairs and just read a book. Just want to read a children's book.
Yeah.
I want everything to be simple again, You do. So what about word count?
Okay. Word count is anywhere from 25,000 to 50,000.
Okay.
However, there is a lot of leeway in this category, particularly because fantasy and mystery tend to have more words, and that's perfectly acceptable. It would not be unusual to come across a middle grade mystery that maybe is 65,000 words.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. What about how are they plot driven or character driven, that kind of thing?
It's usually in a 3-act plot structure.
Okay.
And very much character driven. That tends to be what I've been told that publishers want. They want to see the growth in a character, which means that you need to have a character that has a flaw and that has a problem that's well defined at the beginning, so you know what it is you're rooting for.
Right.
And that you're hoping that character can accomplish or change. And so you need to make sure that your character has that problem well stated, by the first chapter.
Does the character have to be human?
The character does not have to be human. You can have animals. In fact, a very popular series is written by Aaron Hunter, and it's the Warrior series. And Warrior, it's cats. They're all different. You really can't go wrong with that. I will tell you, dog stories tend to be very popular.
Oh,
I am not a publisher, but I have worked in a libraries actually for 14 years, and our dog section is almost always completely cleared out.
really?
Dogs are really, really big. And especially if they don't die, but hey, if you have to kill off your dog, I guess do it. But
No. We know killing off the dogs.
don't do it. Side
No.
note, Gordon
Yeah.
Corman, who's a very well-known middle grade author, was so tired of having his teachers make them read stories where the dog was constantly killed off, that one of his many books that he wrote was called No More Dead Dogs.
Yes. I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, we all know how traumatized we were when what was it Old Yeller?
Old Yeller, oh my
Where the
God.
red fern grows, I think. I mean, when you kill off an animal, it's like,
Sounder, I mean, they're horrible.
yeah,
Don't
this
do
is
it.
not funny. This is not good. And
Oh,
take us to YA.
well, hold on. There's one more thing I
Okay.
wanted to talk about with middle grade.
Rewind.
That is your character's age. There are people that will say, my character is 8. Well, no, your character's not 8 if you've written a middle grade book, or they shouldn't be 8 if you've written a middle grade book. Your character is supposed to be 2 to 4 years older than your youngest reader. So if your youngest reader is 8, that means your character needs to be at least 10.
Right.
So please keep that in mind. And okay, yes, now we can do YA.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to stop there because I want to reiterate that it's because we tend to read up.
Correct.
Granted, some adults want to read down.
Right. But kids
but children tend to read up. So
right.
if they are, when we say YA, a lot of times we're thinking, okay, well, teenagers, but yet YA books tend to be more young adult characters, like true young adult characters.
Yeah. So your characters for YA, your audience, your kids who are reading YA are going to be 12 and up or 14 and up.
Yes.
Because that's what they think of themselves as. They think of themselves as young adults. They are no longer in elementary school. Many of them are no longer in middle school. So of course they are a young adult and they want to be treated as such. So your word count here is going to be higher. It's going to be 50,000 to about 75,000. Okay. And again, with fantasy and with mystery, it can be a little higher. It's not going to, it's not going to be a deal breaker if it's a little higher. Your character's age, do not make them 14 or 15.
Okay.
Editors don't know what to do, like publishers don't know what to do with them when they're that age. They should be at least 16. And one of the reasons I think they should be at least 16, particularly if your story takes place, in the last 50 years, is your character needs to be able to drive.
Yes.
It makes no sense if I'm a 17-year-old in high school and I pick up a YA book to read, if that main character's mom has to drive them to the movie theater with their date.
Yeah.
Like, why would I want to read that? That kid's younger than me. I don't want.
Right.
Forward looking, forward facing, thinking about the future. They are not wanting to go behind when they were back in middle school or couldn't drive a car.
Right.
You need to have your main character be at least 16 or older. And because that's your main audience is going to be that age anyway. So in the general market, typically these are very much angst filled. Sadly, there's a lot of language, sexual content,
sexuality. Yeah.
It'd be great if you could, if there wasn't that sort of just flooding into the market like that. I feel like the kids get enough language and sexual content and everything else that they're exposed to today. So it'd be wonderful to create some YA books where they don't have that. And it's okay if there's a little bit of angst. I mean, we all have
angst.
We've all been teenagers. There's angst.
Right.
So that's fine. But because obviously you still want to be realistic, but That's the main thing. And your plot structure with YA is usually far more complicated.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
You usually have your main plot plus 2 subplots, because there's a lot going on, and the kids can handle that. They can keep track of everything. They want that kind of complexity, honestly, in a YA book. So don't be afraid. Don't think you have to keep it basic. You will bore them if you keep it basic.
Yes. And even let's talk about for the Christian market, just for a quick minute here. I know I have been asked, oh, is this too much, this, or is this too much that? I think we fail to realize what our young people are exposed to these days. And so, we can make those plots a little more complicated and a little more angst driven. And even some complications that we wish our young people didn't have to go through, but they do have to go through. They are going through. And so this could actually give them maybe a godly solution to an ungodly situation.
Yes.
But yeah, I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, can I write about this? Can we talk about that? Yeah, you may as well, because everybody else around them is talking about it, and they're hearing it. And
and Christians are sinners just like everyone else.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna have those issues that we're dealing with, or that our friends are dealing with. And if we can say, hey, here's a realistic situation in a book, but here is a Christian way of handling it.
Right.
Here is a worldview of handling. You want to show them there's alternatives.
There is an alternative. Absolutely. Taryn, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this, because like I said, I get these questions all the time. I simply don't know the answers. I'm often calling you and saying, oh, I just got this question. Well, I finally said, hey, Taryn, let's just do an interview.
I'm so glad. And the thing, I think the biggest deal is with picture books. If we go back to that real quick, they'll say, I have my 1,200 word picture book. And it's like, okay, well, not a picture book. And let's see, what can we do to winnow that down? Remember, it is a picture book. There will be illustrations. So if you are using your words to describe something,
right,
the picture is going to describe it.
Yes.
So you can take any word that has to do with a description out of your story, and it should still tell a story just fine.
Yes. Yeah. And I know there's a whole lesson on how you lay that out for an editor and all that, which we don't have time to talk about. That's why you go to writers' conferences, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you can learn about these things. And let me just throw that in. Taryn and I are the directors of the Florida Christian Writers Conference. If you want to know more about that, because we definitely go into this, we have a whole 8 hours of teaching on children's, just predominantly on children's book writing, but then also the 1 hour workshops as well that will take place. And we have the editors and the agents who are interested in all of that. So go to word-weavers.com/Florida events to know more about that. And just to know about Word Weavers, word-weavers.com. Thank you again, Taryn, for being with me. And thank you everyone for taking the time to find out more about children's book writing and all the different categories. Again, I'm Eva Marie Everson. I am the president of Word Weavers International and the director of Florida Christian Writers Conference. We'll see you again next time.